What is regulation versus reconnection? Now, regulation is what your nervous system is trying to do when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling anxious, panicked, or heartbroken. It's essentially trying to come back to baseline. And often, after a breakup, your go-to source of regulation was the person who just left, because your brain is wired for the neurochemical rewards of that connection: dopamine, norepinephrine, oxytocin. And dopamine and norepinephrine are two of our key players when we're talking about addiction. Now, in episode 5 of the Reconnection Co podcast, we did explore this a bit more in depth. So if you're wanting to dive into that specific topic and the physiology of heartbreak, that episode is a good starting point for you. So if we're talking about dysregulation, what does this actually mean? Dysregulation refers to a state where your nervous system is overwhelmed and you're unable to return to emotional or physiological baseline. It means that your internal state has shifted into survival mode and you've essentially temporarily lost access to clarity, calm, and grounded decision making. So in simple terms, you're not in danger, but your brain and body think that you are. Now, dysregulation can be triggered by almost anything. Sometimes it's not even in relation to your ex. Work stress, for example. And for those of us on the neurospicy spectrum, or not, sensory overload, this can be one. So too much light, too much noise, too much input in general can set it up and set it off. Or something can be ex-related. So a song or a smell triggering a memory or feeling that you're not even consciously aware of. So you might walk past someone who wears the same perfume as your ex. Or if you're lucky enough to get one of the big hitters, you might randomly bump into your ex. Either way, a trigger appears and a dysregulation spiral has begun. Now, dysregulation can occur in anyone, but for those of us with attachment injuries, unresolved trauma, or trauma processing that's still a work in progress, and even neurospice, we can be a little bit more susceptible to dysregulation spirals coming knocking. The symptoms of dysregulation will typically depend on what your nervous system's response is, and this is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And many people will often have a default response, but not always. Either way, being aware of the symptoms is a great way to build your self-awareness and your ability to regulate yourself out of these spirals if they do occur. So essentially, we've got hyper and hypoarousal states. So hyper is more or too much. So hyperarousal will be our fight and or flight response. And this is often some of the things that you might see, like racing thoughts, rapid heartbeat, agitation or panic, or compulsive behaviors like texting your ex or doom scrolling. So hyper means we increase things. So this is the racing thoughts, the rapid heartbeat, so things increase. But then the opposite side of this, we have hypoarousal. So hypo is less. So hypoarousal governs or encapsulates our freeze and fawn responses. So it may look like numbness or shutting down, feeling spaced out or disconnected, emotional flatness or hopelessness. And people that enter the fawn response, it's often driven by some of these people-pleasing behaviors or even just going into silence to avoid conflict. Now, in either case, regardless of if you're hyper or hypoaroused, you're no longer in a regulated state. It's our regulated state where reflection, clarity, and good choices live. Dysregulation is often what drives our bad choices. So for a little bit of neurochemistry in regards to dysregulation, when we're dysregulated, the brain's limbic system takes over. So the limbic system is the part of your brain that manages emotion, memory, and survival instincts. It includes structures like the amygdala, which is often referred to as like the reptilian or the old brain, and the hippocampus. And it's all responsible for detecting threats and triggering your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So when the limbic hijack is at play, we've got these guys jumping behind the wheel. The amygdala, which governs our fear detection, the hypothalamus, which governs our stress response, and the brainstem, which triggers a lot of our automatic survival reactions. And then these guys trigger a flood of stress chemicals like cortisol, which is our stress hormone, adrenaline, which activates the fight or flight response. And then we also see suppression of the prefrontal cortex, which is what's in charge of our decision making and logic centers. So if that's suppressed, then we're not going to be making really sound, logically informed decisions. And we also see lower levels of serotonin and dopamine, which makes it hard to feel calm, grounded, or motivated. So when you're dysregulated, you're literally not thinking clearly. You are in a survival state. Now, the opposite of this is regulation. Regulation is when we can return to safety. So regulation is about helping your nervous system shift out of survival mode and back to a state where you feel safe, clear, emotionally balanced, and are able to pause before reacting. And it's in this regulated space where real connection or healthy disconnection can happen. So what happens with dysregulation and connection? Essentially, you spiral. You think you need to reach for them, or you're wanting them to reach for you, a text or a phone call, essentially something that comes like, I'm thinking of you, essentially a breadcrumb. And it's not because you're ready to reconnect, but it's because you just need the spiral to stop. Your brain and body are chasing a reward, a dopamine hit, to essentially try and get you out of this limbic hijack. So when we've got the limbic hijack trying to do what it thinks you need at the time, a dysregulated drive for relief. So it's chasing emotional pain relief, not relationship clarity. On the other hand, reconnection is about mutual readiness. Now, if you'd like to deep dive this topic a little bit more, episode 8 of the Reconnection Co podcast is available now on YouTube and Spotify.